Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for the latest chapter review for Akatsuki no Yona, chapter 255, also known as Yona of the Dawn. Unfortunately, your eardrums won't be bursting because I'm trying not to strain my vocal cords this week into this weekend. Nothing major, just don't want to overly strain them. They're a little tender, they're a little sore right now. So apologies, or, praise be that you don't have busted eardrums. So chapter 255, right out of the gate. Good chapter. And it does solve one of my gripes about the direction of Zeno's character, reasoning, etc., right? Which a lot of you pushed back on. So quick, tangent, side note, offshoot, footnote here. A lot of you made solid arguments. I think I brought this up last review, and I'll bring it up this one too, because we do solve one of the issues I had with this. We still don't solve the main thing. A lot of you brought up solid arguments. That basic doesn't necessarily mean bad. Just because it's a trope doesn't mean it's bad. As a blanket statement, that is true. In this context, I'm sorry, none of you managed to convince me. I'm not saying you should try to going forward, but as I said, I've read enough, I've seen enough. The immortal who wants to die thing needs to stay, pun intended, dead. That trope needs to die. It has to end here because it's not clever anymore. It's been done literally to death, pun intended. It's just lazy writing. It's just lazy at this point. It's been done too many times. If you're gonna write a character into your story that you want immortal, don't do this. Just don't do it, in my opinion. Or if you're gonna write a character and you want that to be their end goal, don't make them immortal at this point. That would be my suggestion to anybody trying to do something like this again. But that being the case, out of the problems, the 3 to 4 problems that I brought up when this all went down with Zeno, one of them is solved on a surface level, and even deeper, but between the lines, if we read between the lines, is solved in this chapter. So 255 is not a bad chapter whatsoever. We get some Lily time at the beginning of the chapter. And a lot of people like Lily. I like Lily, but for some, Lily's one of their favorite characters, right? Not for me, but I do like Lily as a character in the story. She had good character development, and stuff like that. So I definitely do enjoy the Lily aspects of this chapter and stuff. And she's not taking no for an answer. She's helping, what's his name, OG or whatever there. Like, oh man, like we're still recovering from the Dromos and the fire, and we need medicine, and we need blankets, and we need this, that, and the other thing. It was a big crisis, right? So we're seeing the aftermath and the collection stuff, and Lily is taking charge. Lily seems to be holding everything together and stuff like that, right? And she sees Zeno, and in a very... I initially didn't like this. Upon a couple of rereads to get my thoughts in order, I don't mind it as much that Zeno, in a very serious undertone of doom, Zeno is here, he's going to the mausoleum, the end of the Dragon Wars, the end of an era. Why? He's shocked from behind. Zeno, what? Comedy moment ensues. And, oh, by the way, this has been your lifelong 2,000-year mission. I'm going to distract you with household chores, At first, upon read, I'm like, all right, this is just like last chapter with Hawk and Yona. This is not the time for comedy. And I still hold to that for last chapter. Last chapter had too much levity. And I still don't agree with that. I think it should have been much more somber. This one fits a little better because Zeno is not trying to... He's trying to get this without interference and stuff. So if he can just play the part and still be Zeno as far as everyone else is concerned for right now, then it all works out and stuff. And he is in a rush, but not the biggest rush. He has time. Something about the sunset and stuff. We'll get into that because there's a little bit here. But either way, he gets roped into, Lily's very aggressive attitude of what's going on? What happened with Yona? Why are you here? Well, how's the war going? Blah, 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 blah. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like a Boston woman, talking to you. Or, just gone, right? And it... Honestly, it has more of a placement than in last chapter with Hawk and Yona. The comedic stretch, because it's just to add a little bit of lightheartedness before we get into the really dark undertones of the next half of the chapter, right? And I like that we don't cut away too much here. We follow Lily and Zeno. Lily gets a bit of an update. We see, sort of how the situation is right now with the people and stuff, and that bleeds in to what Zeno is sort of why now, which I enjoy, is the fact that, okay, so the mausoleum is still okay underneath the castle and stuff like that. Everything's all good. He ends up being forced to help, run errands and yada, yada, yada. We already know that, right? And he does try to get out of it, and, it doesn't really work for a while, and then he just pieces it. Boom, gone. Then we get a double-page spread where he explains this, is that it was good. We needed to see this aspect. Could it have been handled in a more, do-or-die way? Sure, but the comedy doesn't hurt it too much, because it does lead into Zeno's reason as to why now. The Dragon Warriors aren't needed anymore. The Koka Kingdom is holding everything together. The people are fine. The people, this country will restabilize, will be okay with or without the Dragon Warriors. It's time. It's fine. They are a strong people. Life will go on with or without us around. So this has just reaffirmed his decision, right? And then we get the big reason. And I like this. I do like this. It does solve one of the three major problems I had. Is the Dragon Warriors are no longer... The Crimson Dragon King is going to be okay because there is someone who can protect her just as well as us. There is someone, the fifth dragon, the Darkness Dragon, the Mister, as he affectionately still refers to him as. He tries to lead this off as calling her the Little Miss and calling him the Mister and stuff, is so he arm's length, no attachment stuff. But we all know it's an endearing, it's an endearing nickname. He initially was using it to keep an arm's length, but we know that it's endearing as hell. So I like this, that Hawk is just that good. It does lead into the idea that Zeno's been waiting for this. Yes, he was waiting around this whole time for the Crimson Dragon King to reincarnate. He did follow the prophecy. The prophecy that how do you say it? Ikso or whatever, the priest, right? Yon's priest there. He did bring up, he brought up the prophecy, but that prophecy has been around, confirmed now for 2,000 years. This prophecy, the words, the ancient words, were given to King Hiryu back 2,000 years ago, and they were passed down to Zeno. Zeno knew of this prophecy, these words from the dragons, but now he feels like it's time. The Crimson Dragon King has been reborn. She is her own person, but she can be protected without us. Had Hawk not been around, it feels like Zeno was waiting for the opportunity where the Dragon Warriors were not needed, whether by country or by kin. They were not needed anymore. So he had to wait until, this state, but Hawk is there. Had Hawk not been there, Zeno might not do this. And I like that reasoning, is that he waited until he was sure that the Crimson Dragon King, he was not going to forget his responsibility and his love for the Crimson Dragon King. But now that there is someone there who can definitely, she doesn't need these Dragon Warriors. She doesn't need the four of us. She will be fine without us. It's now or never. Now is the time. The country will be fine. The king will be fine. And the people will be fine. We are not a necessity anymore, and there's no better time, because we do suffer. So it as I said, it sort of bleeds into both aspects. Is that we suffer, he suffers in his own way, but the three other dragons suffer in their own individual ways for generation after generation. They suffer for the betterment of the kingdom and the king, but the kingdom and the king no longer require them, so there's no need for them to suffer anymore. Otherwise, it's just martyring for the sake of being a martyr. I do like this aspect of the chapter. It does solve one of the major plot problems I did have with Zeno. And he says, I can entrust the Mister with our king. So that's why it's time. I'm heading home now, as he puts. This part is good storytelling. This part is a good aspect. It is lessening the one-dimensional, the immortal who wants to die trope, right? So then he does go on to the mausoleum. We have this sort of, I'm not going to argue waste of pages, but like, okay, he meets with a random guard who's like, oh, you, stop right there. Oh, Sir Yellow Dragon, are you going to the mausoleum? All right, here's my torch, see ya. You know, I don't know why we have this part, but anyways. Now, Zeno says he has to do this. He has to hurry before the sun rises. I do have an issue with that because, once again, how does he know to use the chalice, blood of the warriors, what's the sword and shield, yada, 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 yada. Why before the sun rises? I don't know. I don't know why it has to be done at night. I don't know why it needs to be done before the sun rises. Because there's nothing in... We get basically the later half of the prophecy. We're assuming that this was told. We're finally getting the other part of the prophecy. That was passed down from King Hiryu. Though, as I said, the writing here leaves it a little ambiguous in a negative way that I wish was more confirmed, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So, yeah, so this is sort of questionable number one. Why before the sun rises? Nothing we're going to learn for the rest of the chapter leads us to believe this has to happen within the 24 hours, within the day, right? So, here he says that darkness falls upon the great earth. Through the blood of the dragons, a revival comes again. Bound by the covenant of old. Now, you could make the argument that the whole darkness falls upon the great earth and through the blood of the dragons. But this is talking about the initial, the dragons coming back and the king coming back. It's not the how to end it all, so it still doesn't really connect to the sun rising part. But he continues the prophecy, right? Bound by the covenant of old, when the four dragons assemble, the sword and shield that will protect the monarch shall awaken, and the red dragon shall return at dawn. That is the prophecy we have known. The translation might be a little different from when we first started reading years and years and years ago. Different translation teams and that kind of idea. But that is essentially, that is still the same wording. We have always, most people have taken the sword and shield as not literal, and I don't know why, myself included. This entire time we have been taking the sword and shield that protect the monarch. We have been taking it not literally for no reason, and I don't know why, because it seems like the shield and sword, now granted, it could be a bad misinterpretation by Hiryu and Zeno. That Zeno's earpiece, you know, the sigil, the heirloom, is the shield, which unlocks the coffin, and King Hiryu's sword is the actual sword. It's a literal sword and shield. These things, I think we took this metaphysically because it says the sword and shield that protect the king shall awaken. So, once again, it's possible that Zeno's wrong here. That he is taking it as a literal sword and shield, and he's wrong. Or we, because of the, you know, cool sounding wording of they shall awaken and all this stuff, you know, the very prophecy sounding words, you know, the very epic wording, we have taken it the wrong direction. Who's right? Who's right? Is the community right that it's not a literal sword and shield like Zeno's believing here? Or, you know, is it the reverse? Because the wording is what puts it off. A sword and shield awaken that protect the monarch? That is where everyone came to the metaphysical idea that it's not to be taken literally. That it's metaphorical. That a sword and shield that awaken, that they come into their own, that they are born, that they are people or things, something beyond a physical, literal sword, right? Because how can a sword awaken, right? I mean, so we're kind of splitting hairs over the prophecy here a little bit, but it is interesting. I'm curious as to whether because the awakening part, it's like we literally made the wording ambiguous to sound cool, but it's a literal sword and shield. No, they don't wake up. No, they haven't. Swords and shields don't sleep. We meant a literal sword. We didn't mean a literal shield, but we still meant a literal item that's sort of in the shape of a shield. You know, like, and it awakens too, by the way. It was sleeping and now it's awakened, you know. Okay. And also, this doesn't follow part of the prophecy. Here's my problem too, is that he says, okay, so bound by the covenant of old, the four dragons assemble. The sword and shield that protect the monarch shall awaken, and the red dragon shall return at dawn. Well, the red dragon has already returned in the form of Yona. This is confirmed. The 4 dragons have assembled, and the red dragon returned. But the sword and shield were never relevant. The sword and shield that protect the monarch shall awaken. This implies that they were moved, that they changed state, that something changed. The sword has been in the coffin for 2,000 years and hasn't been touched or moved. Everything in the story has happened. Yona was born, the sword was there before Yona was born, and the sword was there, so the first part of the prophecy isn't actually adding up. This is where I believe that Zeno has misinterpreted it, that Zeno has reached the wrong conclusion here. Because if we follow this in chronological order, the sword and shield that protect the monarch shall awaken hasn't really been fulfilled yet. But the red dragon returning at dawn has. Unless the red dragon returning at dawn is when Yona arrives here at the castle at dawn to find Zeno and stuff. And the sword and shield awakening is part of whatever's going on here. There's a lot here we can unpack. And once again, it's all theorizing, right? So either way, we get a flashback with Zeno. And Hiryu basically brings up that he heard the prophecy, and these are the words, and he wasn't sure of their meaning either. Hiryu brought up that maybe it's his own sword, that he wasn't completely sure, but he's the one who installed the idea in Zeno that it's literally his sword, and the shield that he gave, the emblem that he gave Zeno. The crest that he gave him. These are the 2 things left to him by the dragon gods. They must be the sword and shield. Was Hiryu mistaken? Right? And then he starts mulling it over, and he thinks he figured it out. He points his sword at Zeno and looks at him with a sad face and realizes, oh, forget that. Forget what I did and stuff. And that Zeno has reached the conclusion that Hiryu figured it out. He's pondered this for 2,000 years, and he figured out that his sword is the way to end the dragon's lives. This sword can kill Zeno. Zeno has reached this conclusion on his own. Hiryu did not confirm this. He pointed his sword at it. It alludes to this, that Hiryu did figure out the prophecy, but it's still left ambiguous, and Zeno has reached his own conclusion. Once again, there are so many tangents I've been going off on here, so many different factors, depending on the wording. Which parts do you take literally? Which parts do you take figuratively? Which parts do you take metaphorically? There's so many different avenues to take each wording, and who's right about which part. And do they happen in order? Right? Because a sword and an emblem do not awaken. So we're supposed to take that not literally, but we're supposed to take in the same wording that a sword and a shield are quite literally a sword and a shield. That's where I draw the big question mark, right? So which parts are we supposed to take, and which parts have been interpreted correctly by us, the readers, and which parts have been interpreted correct or wrong, and which parts correctly or wrong by Zeno here, right? So he says he's thought it over for 2,000 years, and, why was this crest given to me and stuff. So he gets the whole, he recites the prophecy again, right? He says that it also, within this wording, it divulges the way to end the Dragon Warriors and the Dragon King. So he comes upon the chalice, Chow, Goal, all that stuff. He gets his hands on the chalice, and he felt that this was the beginning of his time. And as I said, I like the idea that he thought it was time because the country, the king, everything will be fine without them. They no longer are required. So I like that aspect. I do. That this is, at least this explains plot-wise why Zeno has waited until now to do this. That much I'm okay with. That much I am okay with. So here's where he uses, the emblem to unlock the coffin. So he opens it, and he gets the sword. And he says, he knows that this is just an empty husk. His majesty isn't here anymore. That the soul of the Dragon King is within the little mist. And that doesn't mean they're the same person, but that's fine. Them being different is what makes life precious, is what makes humanity precious and all this stuff, right? So he takes the sword, and he says, this is the sword that can kill him. So he thinks that if he fills the chalice with blood, if he cuts himself with the sword, he fills the chalice with blood, he'll become one with the Dragon Warriors. Now this is where he comes up with his own lines. All right, so let's just read this out, okay? So the sword and the shield that protect the monarch shall soak in the blood of the dragon warriors. To the heavens where they're rightfully meant to be, they will return as the day breaks. Hence, the whole has to be done before sunrise part, right? Once again, as I said, we'll talk about the sunrise part, because I still say, there's a little bit of an issue here, because most of you are probably saying, no, it's said right there, that's why it has to be done here. Just wait. The chain that ties the Crimson Dragon King and the 4 dragons together will shatter, and thus the legend will end. This 2 paragraphs is what Zeno is basing everything off of. And he says, I completed all the requirements. With this, it can come to an end. With this, everything is over, sort of idea. And we'll get to the last very sad part of the chapter. But let's talk about this first. So, the whole it has to be done before sunrise thing. Obviously, it's right here, right? They will return as the day breaks. Now, okay. Here's the problem with these 2 paragraphs and the whole sun thing. Is, where did he get these lines from? Are they a missing part of the prophecy? We didn't hear King Hiryu say it. Who said this to him? You know? Because the prophecy seems complete, right? It says, the Crimson Dragon King shall return. Then it goes on to say the sword and shield that protect the monarch shall soak in the blood of the dragon warriors. Okay. Another problem here. If we were to take this literally, once again, the extension of the prophecy isn't an issue. The fact that it comes out of nowhere, we don't see Hiryu saying it in the flashback. We don't see, because it's painfully obvious here. It's so literal. Why was Hiryu and Zeno pondering it 2,000 years ago if they're like, the blood of the dragon warriors shall return? Why would you ponder this? Think about this literally. If I said, okay, so the 4 dragons will assemble, the sword and shield you'll get, and I shall return. The sword and shield that protect me will soak in the blood of all of you, and to the heavens you will return. The chain that ties us will be broken. That is so literal. 1, 2, 3 Blue's Clues steps. What is to think about? What is to ponder? So I'm not convinced that these 2 last lines of the prophecy are actually lines of the prophecy. I don't know where Zeno got them or how he reached this, but this reads way too obvious. This reads, why would Hiryu question it at all? How to end the suffering? Why would he question, it's just not adding up for me. What do you all think? But it just doesn't. It's too painfully obvious. Why would Zeno and Hiryu actually have to think about the meaning of the prophecy if the last half of it lays out it so thick, so obvious? It literally says, cut us with the sword and we'll return to the heavens. Problem solved. There's no other way. There's no, maybe it actually means this, worm your way. It reads way too literal from the other half of the prophecy. So I question the validity of these last 2 lines. I really do. It doesn't read the same as the rest of the prophecy. It reads a little differently, and it reads far too instruction manual. Now, once again, this could be translation-wise, but I'm not willing to put that foot forward quite yet. And why would the priest would know the first half, but wouldn't know this half? Why wouldn't he say this half? Why does Zeno only know this half? And Hiryu? And why didn't we see it in the flashback? Because once again, in the flashback, we'll scroll up here. In the flashback, he says, he thinks about it. He goes, so what does it mean and stuff like that? What does this mean? Those are the words the dragon gods bestowed when I descended upon the land. I'm not sure of their meaning either. Literally, soak us the 4 dragon blood in the sword and the emblem, and we can return to the heavens. It's written there in black and white. So what do you mean you don't understand what they mean? I understand trying to interpret the first half of the prophecy, but the next half, I don't get. The blood of the dragons is the reference to us. I wanted to pass it to you. And what about the shield and sword? They only talk about the first half. Notice that. Zeno only mentions the shield and sword that protect the monarch. Well, that's in the first part. He goes, there's another thing the dragons bestowed upon me. This is the sword, and here's the shield. So it's one of the things I brought. And he thinks, blood of the dragons. When the 4 blood of the dragons, they assemble, the dragon shall return. He never mentions, neither one of them bring up a single line from this second half. So I'm not convinced that this second half is legit. I don't know where he got it from, but I'm just not convinced. I'm just not. And when he reads the prophecy twice in this chapter, both times, he reads only the part that we've known the whole time. And this part is completely separate. It's not continued on the same panel, even the same page. It's brought up as its own standalone, like a secondary prophecy. I'm just not convinced that this is, So, I'm not going to say it's bad writing or whatever. I'm going to say that I have a lot more questions than answers. It seems tied up, like, it's not even tied up in a neat little bow. It seems off, to me. So I question, what's going to happen next. I really do. So Zeno, once again, he has sort of a regret thing here. And somebody can probably bring it up. I didn't fully understand when he says, come to think of it, before I knew it, I was pretty much speaking frankly, wasn't I? Is this referring to the idea that I've already brought up, that referring to Little Miss and Mr. was endearing? It wasn't just to keep them at arm's length. It became a term of endearment for him when he says, I was speaking frankly after all this time. Is that what he was referring to and stuff? Because he thinks of the 4 dragons. He thinks of himself. He thinks of the time they spent together. And he does still stab himself with the sword. He bleeds out into the chalice. But, once again, there's a few other things here that just don't fully add up, even if we are to take this second half of the prophecy as legit second half. First of all, it says, soak the sword and shield in the blood. It mentions nothing about the chalice. Secondary, so why does he have to fill it with the chalice? Secondary, how did he know to trap them in the chalice? See, the chalice isn't brought up at all, so it still leads to more questions than answers. Why the chalice? Why, you could make the idea that, well, it's part of the everything, sure, but Zeno seemed to know exactly, like he had an instruction manual, and the whole closing it with the shield. How did he know that would work? Sort of idea. And also, if we are to take this as the second part of the prophecy, and we are to take this legit, it is the second part, and it was just for paneling or whatever. It says the sword and shield that protect the monarch will soak in the blood of the dragon warriors. To the heavens where they're rightfully meant to, they will return as the day breaks. If the sword and the shield are soaked in the blood, nothing about the chalice, nothing about filling the chalice, and also the sword only touched Zeno's blood. It didn't touch the green dragon, the white dragon, or the blue dragon. Plus, the shield is the unlocking thing for the tomb. It has not touched blood at all. So, see where I'm having issues here? I don't think that this is a legit part of the prophecy. I really don't. I think that wherever Zeno got this from, he reached this conclusion on his own from some, year 34, the second age shit from Fellowship of the Ring with Gandalf searching through all the old texts in Minas Tirith. That's, I swear, he must have, because even in the flashback, as I said, they only bring up the first part of the prophecy. They never talk about the second part, which is very in-your-face obvious. And once again, he fills all the requirements? No, you haven't. You haven't soaked the shield in any blood, and you've only soaked the sword in your own blood. The chalice isn't brought up at all, and you didn't even follow the rules. Assuming that this is the second half of the prophecy, you haven't fulfilled the requirements at all. All you've done is fill a fancy chalice with the blood of the 4 dragons, and you're done it before daybreak, but you missed the other parts. So, I don't know. Once again, I find it very tragic, very sad here at the end. With Zeno laying there on the floor, blood and all that stuff. I expect him to wake up, honestly, because I don't think that this is the end. I think there's a lot more to it. But, yeah, so I'm not convinced, of any of this. I think that I don't know what direction they're going, but I like it. I like it because it's making me question. It's not obvious, which is something that I did have a problem with, obviously, with the direction of Zeno's character, the immortal who wants to die. Done to death, literally. But this, I have so many questions in a good way. But to any of you, as I said, I've been talking way too long. Is there any of you who have any insights into, especially those last lines of Zeno? Is that reference to a chapter I'm not thinking of, or a memory I'm not thinking of? Because sometimes I miss that stuff, right? So let me know what you think it meant. I think it meant the whole arm's length distance, meaning that all his attempts to keep them at arm's length failed, and in the end he did love them, and he loved being with them and all that stuff. That's the way I interpreted it. How did you guys interpret it? Once again, the chapter's still really good. It just leaves me, because I think a good chapter like this, big plot, dialogue heavy chapters, if you don't sit here and question everything and go, well, if this means this, then does that mean that, and blah, 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 and this doesn't add up, but this does, but maybe it means this. That means it's a good chapter, as long as the payoff later on down the line is explained and it's not a plot hole or a problem or whatever. So I think that this chapter is very good for having me use the old gears up here in the brainstem, right? So anyways, I liked the chapter. I thought it was really good, and yeah, I had to read it 3 or 4 times and really get my thought process together before making the review. But yeah, no, really good chapter. So what do you guys think, though? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as always, and we'll see all of you back here next time for the next chapter of Yona the Dawn. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. 2024, the year might suck so far, but this chapter wasn't so bad. So we'll take the little victories where we can get them. Have a good one, everyone. See ya.